When I declared my candidacy on a Facebook page, a local Facebook page, there I go. What's your platform? And I was like, here's my platform. Here are these. Here are these. And I handpicked my platform. I didn't tell anybody what my platform was, and here it is. Meanwhile, there was a Democrat who's running for Senate, and she's like, hey, I'm running for Senate. And they're like, what's your platform? Oh, Democrats believe this. Like, you didn't get the question. What's your platform? Yeah. It's two very different approaches to politics where stay in line, this is what you believe, this is what you're doing, and you'll be fine. Whereas we're herding cats on the Republican side. But the reality is we need the House and the Senate to make so many of the changes that all of us want to make and Maine needs.
Robert Wessels, candidate for governor of Maine. I think the first place we have to start is with this Amazon ballot fiasco. We reported last week a woman in Newburgh receives 250 bundles of absentee ballots via Amazon Prime. Still no answers from Secretary of State Shenna Bellows as to how this possibly could have happened. I've been doing research and thinking back. This is the biggest breach of election integrity since longtime Democrat Speaker of the House John Martin, the Earl of Eagle Lake, was caught, or I guess implicated, in a ballot stuffing scandal. There's no indication yet that these ballots were shipped with envelopes where they could have been cast. There's still some questions that need to be answered there. But absentee voting has already started, and Secretary of State Bellows hasn't announced any findings of any investigation, and she's handling the entire thing in-house. So what was your reaction when you learned about these absentee ballots popping up in Amazon shipments at random residences in Newburgh, Maine?
Yeah, I'm sure I had the same reaction that most of your viewers and listeners did. Obviously, the first question is how in the world do they end up in an Amazon package, right? But really, the question behind that is how in the world are they out of the hands of those who should be having them, and where were they intended to be dropped off? I'm quite positive that Amazon isn't shipping ballots these days, and so somebody stuck it in mid-process, mid-shipping, thinking it was going someplace else. And so how many other ballots are there? And why in the world is it acceptable that Shenna Bellows and the Secretary of State is doing their own investigation? I can think of very few people within our government that I trust less than Shenna. She has already proved she's extremely partisan in her decision-making. And we don't need somebody who's extremely partisan to be investigating this. We need somebody who is willing to find out the actual truth for Maine people. And so I think whether we get a nonpartisan state police involvement or whether it goes federal, I think we need somebody else other than that to investigate this, because ultimately it goes back for me to election security and the integrity of our electoral system. And I've been saying for 2 years, since I've been campaigning, that we need a system where the Maine people can be confident. And even if we're going to say there hasn't been any voter fraud at this point, I can guarantee you from the thousands of conversations I've had around the state that probably pretty close to 50% of the people are not confident that Maine's election results are accurate and are what are needed.
Oh, and that includes Shenna, by the way.
Yeah.
Shenna admitted in a podcast with Mark Elias that non-citizens are registered to vote. So the Secretary of State herself believes that felonies have been committed, that the voter rolls lack integrity, that non-citizens are registered to vote.
And my understanding is that she's allowed access to third-party companies, nonprofits, to our voter rolls, but will not allow federal access.
Correct.
This is crazy.
Yeah, she's allowed ERIC, which is supposedly a nonpartisan firm, but is a Democrat firm that helps to maximize Democratic advantages in elections by accessing Secretary of State data. So I think that the federal investigation that the Civil Rights Division is leading into Shenna Bellows and requesting these voter rolls will very easily expand into a probe of what's happened with these absentee ballots. But say we get to, like absentee ballots already being cast.
Yeah.
Say we get to November 4th, we have no answers about where these 250 ballots were supposed to have been delivered to. There's no clerk in Maine that says that they're short 250 ballots. And then you look at the election results, and question 1, which is voter ID and restrictions on absentee ballot voting, loses. And question 2, a gun control measure, wins. And the deciding margin is absentee ballots. What then?
Correct. Again, I'll go back to we need voter integrity, right? We need electoral integrity. And voter ID, I'm in favor. I'll be voting yes on 1. And let's just be clear for those who are confused or misled, I guess it would be even more accurate, by the Democratic advertising for it. It is not getting rid of absentee ballots and absentee voting. And so we just need to be clear about that. But voter ID is just a first step, right? It's not going to be the end all and get our elections where they need to be, but it's a great first step. And so the question as far as where are we at on November 4th, ultimately I think it's going to hinge on that investigation. So will they be done with the investigation by November 4th? Probably not. So how do we go about if the investigation, nonpartisan investigation finds that there was actually something going on that could influence the vote or did negatively influence the vote, I think we need to figure out where we go from there to overturn it.
Charlie Dingman, the chairman of the Maine Democrats, has said multiple times in mass text messages that go out to voters throughout the state that if voter ID is implemented, the Democratic Party could lose 13,000 votes. Why do you think that is?
The only conclusion I can come to is people are voting who shouldn't be voting, right? Because Troy Jackson on X the other day made a comment about how he's defending the right of people to vote, and I made the comment of who exactly, whose right are you defending, right? Because presenting an ID, same thing we present for cigarettes, same thing we present for tattoos, going into a casino, anything that we as a society have deemed you shouldn't be doing up until a certain age, we've all presented IDs, and they don't seem to have any issues with those as their right to go and buy those cigarettes or alcohol. And so the reality is that the rights and requiring an ID does not inconvenience anybody. Everybody has access, and this legislation even provides access for somebody who can't afford it to get a state ID, for this purpose. And so the ID is not an issue. And so the reality is, okay, if everybody who's legit can have an ID, then it leads me to believe that the ones that we're blocking are the ones who shouldn't be voting.
So I guess we can move into more about your gubernatorial campaign, but just to be clear, it's Monday, October 6th. We're waiting for the Secretary of State to make some kind of an announcement today because October 5th would have been the deadline for all of these absentee ballots to have been delivered. So by the time this comes out, maybe she's had her Scooby-Doo moment and taken the mask off and solved this problem. I'm skeptical that will be the case, but just to date this episode in time. But Robert, I guess to begin with, since you're a newcomer to Maine politics in terms of not having been in the state legislature or run for Congress or something like that, just introduce yourself. A little biographical sketch for people who are watching and people who are trying to figure out where they're going to vote in a Republican primary.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So yes, I am not a career politician. To be clear, I did spend 4 years as a selectman in the town of Paris. One of those, I was chair. So not completely out of touch as far as the process is and what that looks like. I learned a ton. It was like drinking from a fire hydrant for those 4 years and what that looks like politically. But as far as the state level, I have no name recognition, and I understand that. I'm a business guy. We were just talking about it before we got on air. I've spent the last 21 years in retail. Really, I just graduating out of college, figuring life out, and at that point, I was in the financial industry. And I love finances. I love investing, all of that stuff. And I thought that's where I was going. And then we found out we were pregnant. And I said, I was selling health insurance, ironically enough, but it didn't come with the job. And so I said, I need some health insurance. Yeah, irony. And so I looked at Walmart and said, hey, I can get health insurance by the time Josh, who's my oldest, is born. And I jumped into stocking shelves on overnights. And I quickly fell in love with it and decided that's where I was going to stay. And during that time, I guess it's worth calling out that I wasn't making enough money. We had decided to, once Josh was born, we decided we wanted Christy, my wife, to stay at home, be a stay-at-home mom, and take care of the kids. And my Walmart paycheck wasn't enough, and so I got a part-time job at the post office during those years, working part-time there and full-time at Walmart, stocking shelves on overnights. Over the years, I climbed through the ladder at Walmart, learned leadership, and eventually switched over to U.S. Cellular, and I was a store manager there for the last 14 plus years. So getting my MBA and really just learning leadership through the School of Hard Knocks and learning about life and being a parent, being a family man. And we did homeschool all 3 of our kids. 2 of them are graduated, and Lana's still going. She's a junior this year. And it's been an amazing journey.
And so you've got 3 kids, all, I guess, late teenagers?
17, 19, and 21.
Okay. And what made you decide to take the homeschooling path? Because you would have made that decision earlier, I guess, before all of the, the transgender stuff was invented. So I guess, did you see the writing on the wall much earlier, or was there something else?
No, not really.
A religious inclination, or what led you to pick homeschooling that early?
Yeah, I really wish I could tell you I saw the writing on the wall, but no. The reality is my wife is a certified teacher and just absolutely passionate about education and had plans. She basically, here's what we want to do, here's what we want this to look like, and so we decided together that, let's do it. It sounds like it's the best route for our kids. It's funny, in that conversation when she came to me, she's like, I really want to homeschool the kids. I said, okay, but they can't be weird. Back in the day, that's that was literally
the socialization thing, right? It's your kids. If you homeschool your kids, they're going to be not properly socialized. But it seems these days that most of the homeschool kids that I've met seem very pleasant and very well-mannered and not stuck to their phones with pink hair, wearing, furry animal costumes at the State House.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that was my concern when we went into that, though. And probably, 10 years into it, I'm like, okay, like we can socialize them a little less, right? Like they're constantly out with people, constantly doing things or whatever. We didn't tone it down, but they had, whether it was robotics or whether it was sports or whether it was church, all of these things, they just were constantly interacting with adults as much as they were with their peers. And we were fortunate that there was a great homeschooling group nearby that they could interact with. So
so like a pod or homeschool
not
association?
necessarily, but like just a bunch of families that did homeschooling.
Okay.
Yeah. So
there's in the town that I grew up in Dexter right now, there's a kind of a local dispute, but the idea is that some homeschool group leaders ran for school board, and the teachers' unions didn't like that, or the people who are in control of the school system didn't like that. So they're trying to pass an ordinance that says that people who are on the homeschooling side of things can't run for school board. And so I guess I would ask, you've been, if you're elected governor, you're going to have to make education policy.
Yeah.
As a candidate, you've been critical of education policy. So what do you make of this idea that somebody who has homeschooled their children or is an advocate for homeschooling can't have a valid opinion about education policy or what's happening in public schools?
I wholeheartedly disagree with it. I guess, case in point, my wife is on our school board. And so, again, we don't have kids in the public school, but we care about where education is going. And she's, with her background in education, she's absolutely a perfect candidate for school board. And so, no, I feel very strongly. They've been happy to take my tax dollars, all of these years, right? And I have people who are accusing me of like, oh, well, you just don't want to pay in tax. I'm like, I've been paying taxes and not even getting any money for, anything for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, no, we absolutely, need to include, give those people who want to do that and sacrifice in that way, as long as they're qualified. They need to be able to do that.
Do you think people who homeschool their children should get a deduction on their property taxes equivalent to what goes to the public school as a credit towards school supplies, lesson plans, and that kind of thing?
So I am it's almost like you're talking about school choice.
Yeah,
right?
or like the money following the child rather than the school.
And so I am a fan of school choice, but I'm not a fan of the money following the child per se. I'm a fan of tax credits and the reason for that to me is too often we see that the money following the student, eventually the government may turn on that and say, you know what, you can't teach that. You can't do this during homeschool because the government's giving you money.
Yeah,
it's happened elsewhere.
Comes with strings.
The government money always comes with strings, and so if you're doing tax credits instead, the government's not giving you money. They're just not taking as much of your money, and so I'm a big fan of that.
Okay, so like a reduced property tax bill if you don't have kids enrolled. I suppose the people who don't have any kids would maybe ask not to pay property taxes as well.
Yeah.
But I guess also on the education issues, there's the controversy that has really dominated the headlines this year is about transgender athlete policies, boys and girls sports. The state of Maine right now forces female athletes to compete against male athletes who identify as female. Everyone by now is familiar with the conflict between the Trump administration and the Mills administration. What is your view of that conflict? I know during the debate that Ray Richardson moderated in Old Orchard Beach a couple of weeks ago, you talked a little bit about your position on that issue, but I guess what do you think the state of Maine should be doing in that regard? Is this a local issue for each school district to deal with, or is this something where the governor has some authority here and should step in and set policy statewide?
At this point, Maine Department of Education and the state are dictating every detail about our schools, which I'm not a fan of. I think we need to decentralize a lot of those education decisions. But at this moment, they're dictating everything else, including the fact that you should include boys and girls sports. And so I'm absolutely against that. And funny story, so I've spent the last week at the Freiburg Fair, and just two booths down was a tent where they were doing a weight thing. You could, just 220 pounds deadlift. Mm-hmm. And if you wanted, walking by, you have the option to do that. And as the week went on, they were just setting the record, right? And so could you do more than the other person has done? And by Friday or so, the women's record was 13 deadlifts would win the record. The men's was at 72. And I'm like, hello, right? Case in point, we are different. We were created different And we just have differences. Let's celebrate those differences and live life accordingly, right? We're not the same. And this was just clear as day. You know, I'm going, this is why boys should not be in girls sports.
I'm kind of impressed by that broad that was able to
huge.
deadlift 220
I know,
13
exactly.
times.
Yeah. I look up like going, I'm not even close to there.
Yeah.
You know?
So I guess during the debate in Old Orchard Beach, you were physically positioned on the far right, but also seemingly positioning yourself ideologically as perhaps the more conservative candidate in the primary, especially on some social issues. You clashed with State Senator Jim Libby on the abortion issue. Is this something that you're I guess, is that a domain that you're intentionally seeking to claim? Do you view yourself as the most conservative candidate on social issues in this primary?
No, I'm not. I'm certainly not trying to claim that domain. I'm just trying to be honest with the people. And you know, if I lose some voters because of any particular issue, whatever that is, then I'm not a politician, but I know how to tell the truth. I know how to. You know, when I'm asked a question, I will answer that, and I'll be honest about it, because it's really easy to know when you're honest every time. You know, I know what I said last time, and so no, I'm not claiming the domain, and I'm not making any of that as, you know, a huge part of my campaign platform necessarily. But I'll answer the question, and where I land, I land. I think that the voters of Maine, number one, need the truth 100% consistently. To be able to make their decisions. And I would also say that, you know, they're smart enough to make their decisions based on that. And again, if any particular boys and girls sports, right, if I lose a voter because I say they should be separate and boys should not be playing girls sports, okay. Like, if you feel strongly about that issue enough to say I'm not voting for Robert, okay, right? And every issue, somebody feels differently about it. And so maybe there's somebody who feels strongly enough that I just lost their vote with that. But the reality is, okay, I need to be truthful. I need to be completely honest and upfront. And if you end up at the end of this campaign saying Robert is by far the most right, you know, the most conservative, okay, you know, I don't know where I land necessarily compared to the other candidates, but I'll be honest about the issues and see where it comes.
So abortion would be the other, I guess, aspect of social policy. Strangely enough, leading into the 2022 election, the Democrat candidate and the Republican candidate both had the same exact policy when it comes to abortion, which was that it should remain the same throughout the state of Maine as it had been since 1993, regardless of the Supreme Court decision repealing Roe v. Wade. Now, obviously, we know Governor Mills lied about her intentions, came in and supported the most radical late-term abortion law on anywhere in any jurisdiction on the planet. They even voted down a proposed amendment from then Senator Eric Brakey that would have prevented the sale of fetal organs for research purposes, which is pretty barbaric. Mm-hmm. There is undoubtedly going to be a push by some state lawmakers and activists to roll back such an extreme abortion law. Where do you think is the happy, I guess, where do you think abortion law in Maine should be, and how do you navigate the balance between what's politically viable, given the number of people in this state who support more, I guess, permissive abortion laws versus what's right, what's proper, what's moral?
Ultimately, as governor, right, I'm not a legislator, and so I'm not making those decisions.
But you do get to introduce legislation,
yes.
Governor's bills, that kind of thing,
and I get to influence it.
Yeah,
right?
You can browbeat people, and you can call them nasty names.
I am willing to sign any law, any bill that comes before me that lowers the number of babies that are killed. I look at it as scientifically, right? In every way, it's life. it's a life in there. Like 100% of the fetuses, they like to call them fetuses. I think it's probably just so they don't call them babies, right? But every single one of those who have come out have turned out human. And so those are lives in there. And I would sign any bill that comes to my desk that would lower the number of lives that we're killing. I think that we are on a path in this state that diminishes the value of life. That could also, and I said this in the forum, that also includes the fact that we're willing to do, basically, if you want to commit suicide, physician-assisted suicide in the state, right?
Yeah,
Again,
it doesn't get a lot of attention. I think
it doesn't.
Canada gets all the attention.
Yeah.
I saw a story over the weekend. Canada has now started doing organ harvests from their MAID program, Medical Assistance in Dying. Yeah. So you can be encouraged to commit medically assisted suicide, and then they're going to give your organs to someone else.
Yeah. And again, I think we're just going to continue to move that line on what's acceptable for physician-assisted suicide, to the point where, you know what, hey, rough day, I want to die, there you go, right? And I just think it's wrong. And we are just on this slippery slope where we devalue life, human life, and it just continues to go.
Do you think a terminally ill cancer patient should have the right to have some form of medical assistance in dying, or medically assisted suicide? Because I guess from my personal experience, I know that the assisted death for the terminally ill or people who are on palliative care has kind of informally been a thing all along. You get a palliative care kit that contains enough morphine in it that no one has to suffer in their final hours. So it's informally, we've been handling that as a society within family units. But it seems like the government programs push that into a different direction, where you've got people. There's someone in the Netherlands who was an alcoholic and underwent assisted suicide for alcoholism. Mental health disorders, poverty, those kinds of things are being cited as reasons for assisted suicide in Canada. So do you see any role for assisted suicide in Maine, or is it something that should just be totally barred by law and just kind of handled by families privately, if you get what I'm saying?
I think the best government is a tiny government, right? I think that the reality is I'm going to always lean towards less government, which is the opposite of what Maine is doing right now. And with that being said, like, again, if it's always happened, then, right, like, it's not been a thing on a government level. It doesn't need to be a thing on the government level. And the reality is, without getting too morbid, right, everybody always has the option to commit suicide, right? Again, let's be clear, I'm not encouraging it, right?
It's true.
But from day one, people have always had the option and the means and the ability to commit suicide should we choose. And it doesn't even have to be legal. What are they going to do, right? And so the reality is they have that option there. I'm not taking that option away. But I also put myself in the position of a doctor, and I can't fathom being somebody who has set out to help people live and make their life better.
And taking the Hippocratic Oath.
And taking the Hippocratic Oath, and then all of a sudden I'm called on them to end their life. I couldn't fathom being in that position.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a slippery slope when you add the incentive of where their organs are being donated, and I mean that's like China stuff. The sale of healthy organs in black markets. It's not a path you want to go down. So I guess that was one area of not disagreement, but kind of I guess, policy area that was discussed during the debate in Old Orchard Beach. Another was tax policy, and there seemed to be some different opinions expressed on where the state should derive revenue. And but just from a big picture, the disagreement seemed to be some people favoring a sales tax or consumption-based approach or value-added tax like they have in Europe. Others saying, well, we have the income tax, we kind of have to rely on that. We can work to bring it down, but by and large, that's where our taxation is going to have to come from. I think the argument in favor of the sales or consumption tax is you're exporting the tax burden to the out-of-staters who come up to enjoy the coast of Maine and Maine's natural beauty. So in terms of tax policy, where do you find, like, what philosophically, what direction would you want to head in, and what would you look to do in practical terms as governor?
Let me back up just a little bit. To me, I think it's really important with all of these discussions to keep in mind that Maine is not in a bubble. Okay, Maine is one of 50 states, and in this day and age where people can travel, people can move, people can work remotely, more than ever, we in the state of Maine are in competition with other states. And so I say that because it's a critical backdrop that our current administration doesn't keep in mind. And so when you're talking taxes, right, we're in competition with not just New Hampshire, but Tennessee, Florida, Texas, all of them. And so because I say that because if you're a doctor and you're looking, where am I going to, I just got out of med school, where am I going to go live? You're looking at this list of states that need you, and you're going to pick your favorite one. And so people are far more mobile now than they ever have been, whether that's being a doctor or whether that's remote work with technology or whatever. And so we have to be intentional about what we make for decisions for taxes. And the state of Maine is absolutely horrific in our taxation, one of the highest. So to answer your actual question, I kind of fall somewhere in between, and the reality is, so again, I've been campaigning for 2 years, and I have been having tens of thousands of conversations with everyday Mainers. And personally, I look at property tax as, how is this even a legit taxation? Okay, I have a bought and paid for house. How is it that because I don't give the thousands of dollars to my town, they can all of a sudden take my house? Do I really own my house? If that's the case, and where is that line? And so to me, I would like to see us address property taxes in the state of Maine, which will also, by the way, help our housing crisis that's in the state of Maine. And so I think a Band-Aid for that that I would like to see would be to cut the state budget. My target is in the first year to cut the state budget by $2 billion and take that money. So basically put money back in the budget, take that and put it towards a much larger homestead exemption. Let's just say, throw out there $450,000 for Mainers' primary residence. And so that would make it so the vast majority of Mainers don't have to pay property tax on their primary residence, and the towns would still be covered. I don't love that as a long-term solution. My long-term solution I would love to see is let's figure out a way we don't need property taxes, but we can still fund our schools and our towns, right? What does that look like? But as we already have homestead exemption, it's in there. It's a tool. Let's just make it much bigger and make it so you're not going to lose your house if you have a house that's valued at $450,000 or less. From there, I would like to go towards income tax. I would start to lower the income tax because, again, we are competing. And so if you have somebody who is making really good money, they're going to live 6 months in a day in another state where they don't have income tax or they have much lower income tax. We need to do things that bring in businesses. We need to do things that bring in families who have great incomes. And right now we're chasing them all away. And so I would like to see, again, property tax is my priority, but then I think that we need to go and start attacking income tax. And I would love to see us get rid of both. That is certainly not a first year or even second year thing, but I would like to see us go that way and start reducing that income tax as well. I'm good with the consumption tax, and the reality is the consumption tax, you're paying taxes on something you're buying, right? Yes, to your point, right? People who come in and visit us from outside of the state will also be paying those taxes for us, and so every dollar that one of our vacationers or seasonal people come in and spend in taxes is a dollar that I don't have to spend and you don't have to spend. And so I love the idea of spreading that wealth as far as the taxes go and having them help us while they're here. That would be one of the benefits of being vacation land. But even if it's all of us, I'm choosing to buy this item, and I can choose not to.
So you're consenting to the tax as opposed to the income tax, which in most cases is involuntarily withheld from your paycheck.
I dare say all cases, other than I could decide not to live here, right?
So some people have decided not to pay those
Absolutely.
taxes, and then they end up in jail. You mentioned the housing issues in the state of Maine. There's a well-cited study that shows where something like 85,000, 88,000 houses short of where we'll need to be by 2030. At the same time, we're short houses. Governor Mills wants to bring 75,000 new workers. She claims they're not going to be all asylum seekers and foreign nationals, but this was announced as part of her Office of New Americans agenda. So it's wink, wink. We know exactly what she's actually proposing here. So it seems like we're bringing in foreign workers at the same time we have a housing crunch. There's domestic in-migration as the result of COVID. There's some Chinese agricultural specialists buying up lots of houses. We seem to have just this mixture of forces that is making housing so expensive in Maine that young people have no hope whatsoever of ever being able to afford a home in this state. We have, I think, 3 or 4 different funds set up that the legislature has created, all of them to address the housing crisis. There's like the Rural Housing Fund, the Low Income Housing Fund, the Urban Housing Fund. There's all these different programs. None of them seem to be working. We have an authority set up specifically to operate as a bank just to help with the housing issue. We've got all this housing policy, spending so much money on it, all these employees, and we still have a housing problem. So why is that? And what can a governor do to ensure that we have a housing supply so that a young guy who graduates from high school in Maine, goes to the University of Maine of Orono, wants to have a house and a family, can do that, can stay in Maine? How do we do that?
Yeah, so let me remind you, I have a 17, 19, and 21-year-old, right? Like, again,
they're all facing this decision.
They are. And 2 of them are living in my basement, right? And so the reality is, and we talk about housing, and a lot of what you're talking about is buying a house, but rent has increased from, I believe, in 2018, the regular rent was $800, and now it's $1,700, right? And so many of them can't even rent on their own, and they have to, team up with somebody and have somebody else co-live. And so it's a very real crisis. And we keep wondering, why are our kids leaving the state? And why are these programs not working? Because we're addressing symptoms. We continue to throw money at it, which, by the way, all of the money we're throwing at it is your money and my money. So we continue to tax people, which hurts their living, to throw money at this. We're taking your money and we're throwing it to my kids so he can buy a house, right? And so the reality is you have to ask, why is this an issue? And we have to go back to the fundamentals like you do in business. You sit there and go, okay, like, let's look at this. What is the cause? What is the root cause? And the reality is it's a supply and demand, as you're talking about. And as I'm continuing to tour the state, I was talking to somebody over in Brunswick, and she was personally friends with somebody who had been kicked out of her apartment, and they put illegal immigrants in there. And so, yes, that is a very real personal situation where we literally were taking Mainers out of their house and putting in illegal immigrants. So the illegal immigration is absolutely playing into this as part of that supply and demand, and they need to not be here. I have family who is immigrants and friends who are immigrants, and they did it legally. 100%. They add a ton to this state, and they bring it. And I'm perfectly fine and happy with immigration when done legally. But we need to get rid of the illegal immigration, and so that's part of it on the demand side. The other part that we're not addressing is on the supply side, and I've had lots of meetings with builders and different construction people around the state, and one of the numbers that keeps getting thrown out is that about 20% is added to the cost of a house when building in Maine just because of unnecessary regulations. One of the big ones that they always go to first when I'm having that conversation, I just like, hey, name one. Recently, we just, as a state, we required an R value. So I'm not a builder. You don't want me building your house, but we required a huge R value for insulation, something that is not even made commercially.
So the R value is the measure of, I guess, heat retention or cold retention.
Yeah.
I guess if it's air conditioning,
but thickness and whatnot. Yeah.
Insulative property.
Yeah,
and so my science classes here.
There you go. And so we're requiring it, far beyond not only what is necessary, but from what I'm being told by the professionals, they're concerned actually long term with the mold that it's going to cause because of it doesn't allow for that airflow at all. And so not only is it overkill, but it's going to cause long-term damage. And
again, the reason we're doing this is because the Democrats think they can change the weather. That's the motivation. Is like,
sure,
we have the solar panels and the energy efficient appliances that break after a year, and these high R values mandated because we're going to change the weather,
or because we just love to make laws and flex our power. I don't know.
There is a weird personality trait that some on the left have, where they just like ruling over people. COVID kind of made that very, very clear. They just like being able to boss people around.
Let's go into the green just a little bit. Not a huge fan of green energy, and more specifically the climate change narrative, which is what's always being pushed, right? Interesting. So we all know carbon, right? The carbon footprint is kind of the end-all be-all in that category from what we're talking about. And I was doing some research recently and just kind of playing, so these are not official numbers. But one official number is in the 2021 EPA report, Maine used 22 million metric tons of CO2. Okay, so that's the real number from the EPA report. And so then I was asking AI, I'm like, so what does a tree, because obviously trees
that's
take
what I was
in
gonna ask.
CO2,
is it
right?
Net or
correct,
gross?
And so what does a tree take in for CO2 to get rid of that 22 million that we had? There were some varied numbers. So just taking the smallest number, basically it would require 2 billion trees in the state of Maine to be net neutral for our carbon footprint. Okay, I'm like, okay. What's an estimate for how many trees we would have in the state of Maine? I thought 2 billion is a pretty low hurdle, right? 20 billion was, again, conservative number for that. So by definition,
Maine is a negative.
With no solar farms, no anything else, we are 10 times net neutral on our carbon footprint. So the reality is none of this is needed, and every tree we're cutting down for these fancy solar fields, right, that are ruining our landscape and ruining our energy prices is actually hurting the CO2 as well.
I mean, and the solar panels are destabilizing the grid. They're made by slaves in China. 88% of the companies that own them and collect fees on them are based outside of the state of Maine. So all of our electricity bills are going up for the profit of companies outside the state of Maine.
Not to mention the recyclability at the end of life,
which is going to be paid for by taxpayers.
Correct, and the wind, right? Yeah. Both. So, again, we keep pushing green, and the reality is, our legislature, by pushing all of this narrative, which is false, we are making decisions in Augusta based on that narrative and for nature that are not necessary, and we should be making decisions in Augusta for the people. We should be going for energy that is affordable and reliable, and instead we're going for the expensive, unreliable.
In the debate, there seemed to be pretty broad consensus that nuclear power, small compact nuclear reactors, should be at least part of the conversation. Permitting and stuff, that takes a little while to unfold. Are there steps that you would take immediately as governor to work to lower energy prices? Withdrawing from RGGI, ending the net energy billing that rewards the solar companies. Are there, small changes like that you would make that could immediately reduce energy costs?
Yeah, so you certainly mentioned a couple of them, and I think getting rid of the solar subsidies is hands down one of the first things that we need to start doing. I also want to see us get rid of the megawatt cap on hydro. I just find it ironic that small hydro power, that's renewable, but if it's big, it's not renewable. Like, it's still hydro. It's still right. Like,
I'll be honest, I'm ignorant of why that cap even exists. Maybe I'm too young to remember the debate. Was it something about fish?
So yeah, ultimately their problem with hydro overall is fish. If you want my personal opinion, I believe the cap exists to push energy companies to buy more solar and wind. Right. Again, insert conversation we just had on solar and wind, because there's no logical conclusion or reason why we would choose to get rid of the bigger hydropower
or oppose lifting the cap now.
Correct. So I think that those need to be the first steps, but I also think, generally speaking, we need to make it our goal as a state to be energy independent, and I think we can do that. The other piece is, there's a train coming at us called energy, where basically there's a much higher demand for energy that's coming, and we're not ready for it as a state. We continue to just push wind and solar. They're inefficient, they're ineffective, and we don't seem to care that all of our eggs are in those baskets, and we need to diversify. We need to include hydro. We need to include natural gas. We need to include nuclear, and whatever other new technology comes down the road. We need to consider that, and we're not. We're just
a lot of people don't even realize that about a third of our electricity as a state does come from nuclear. It's just not produced in Maine. It's produced in New Hampshire. And the other 2/3 is natural gas from New Brunswick. Maine's domestic energy production is very, very low, and once that the AI train arrives and there's demand for electricity, we might find ourselves having to bid against a data center in New Brunswick or a data center in New Hampshire that wants that energy more. And we don't have domestic energy production like the windmills and the biomass and the solar panels aren't going to be enough to keep Granny warm in the middle of the winter, which is the other weird thing. Hannah Pingree especially has her fingerprints all over this, one of the Democratic candidates who was like the policy czar for Governor Mills for 6 years. They called this beneficial electrification. And it's like a Orwellian. It sounds like a Soviet term, but the idea was to push everybody on heat pumps, get rid of natural gas, get rid of oil, put everybody on heat pumps. At the same time, we're weakening our electrical grid, relying more on intermittent power sources. We're radically increasing our consumption, or the demand we're placing on our grid by pushing for heat pumps and electric vehicles and that kind of thing.
I was just going to say,
this weird, like, brittle conundrum in Democratic energy policy that has been in place for now 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, and we were so close to having that EV mandate come in. Was it just last year or the year before?
150 wackos in Portland signed a petition, and
all of a sudden,
we almost have no vehicles.
It's considered minor, and we may, basically it pushes us all to go to New Hampshire to buy our new cars. But the reality is that, yes, we continue to have some of the highest energy costs, the biggest increase year over year in New England, and not even by, it wasn't even close. And so the decisions we continue to make energy-wise continue to hurt the people of Maine. And to your point, like, not only do we decrease supply, but we increase demand by encouraging people to go, or mandating almost that they go and buy an EV. So no, it doesn't make sense. And again, it's a common sense approach, and it's not that common these days.
No. Another thing I wanted to talk about, and I think it's worth talking about with all candidates, is the crime issue. Both the common street level crime that you see in the police blotter from day to day, but also organized crime, and not just the Chinese drug traffickers that we've reported on a lot, but the Dominican drug traffickers that are bringing fentanyl by the kilo quantity into the state. There's some very well-established organized crime networks, the drug trafficking organizations that are making tons of money by causing a great deal of harm to the state of Maine. The social costs, the financial costs of the criminal and drug problem in the state is huge, almost incalculable. And we saw it very, very vividly in the homeless camps that sprouted in Bangor, in Portland, Lewiston, Sanford. Those have seemed to have dispersed somewhat or just spread out a little bit, but the drug problem still remains. The antidote to this that the Mills administration has pursued for 6 to 7 years can broadly be described as harm reduction. That's more people addicted to Suboxone instead of fentanyl. More people going to needle exchange clinics and getting free clean needles instead of reusing dirty needles, and restorative justice practices in our jails that make them more comfortable, more Norwegian, and more Medicaid dollars for rehab facilities outside of the state and in the state. So I guess, what would you do as a governor to change the trajectory of the state when it comes to the opioid epidemic? And are there changes that you would make to our current policies of harm reduction?
Yeah, so you call it harm reduction.
I use the term that they use.
Yeah. I call it soft on crime, right? We again, in Augusta, we absolutely love to make laws. And again, I think it's because it gives them the feeling of power and saying, oh, we're going to dictate this. This is how you should live your life. And the reality is we continue to make laws left and right, but then we stop enforcing them. And so let's just talk about I don't know if you know that there's a whole bunch of illegal Chinese grows, right?
I've heard something about that.
And so let's just talk about that, right? Again, we have laws in place on what it looks like to have a legal marijuana grow in the state. And we're choosing to not enforce those laws. And by choosing to not enforce these laws, what are we doing? We're making the black market for marijuana look more and more attractive to those who are currently following the laws. Because here you have the Chinese ones that we're not enforcing. They don't have to pay any of, go through the red tape time-wise. They don't have to pay any of the fees, any of that to be legal, but they're not being stopped. Meanwhile, Joe business owner over here is going through all of that. And I'm glad that the laws are in place. I'm glad that, there's things in place to make sure that they're clean and doing business right. But the reality is that they're going to look over here and go, I could just do that. Clearly, we're not enforcing these. And so we are making that black market look more and more palatable and putting these legit businesses out of business because we're choosing to not enforce the laws. And so we need law enforcement. We need to, across the board, we need justice to be blind. The other piece that plays into it, and I was, chatting with a sheriff, actually Eric Small, who's, running for
The police chief in Sanford.
For CD1. Great guy, by the way. You should check it out if you're in CD1. But the reality is, I was chatting with him, and he was talking about how so often his team will arrest somebody. They'll or so often they can't because of laws that have been in place. Like they have the legislature has significantly increased how much cocaine is illegal and things like that. But and so often they can't arrest them. But if they do, they're out on the street again in the next day. And so some people get arrested 23 times, right? Think about being an officer who's doing this and I'm wasting my time, right? A ton of paperwork, and it's for what?
Yeah, well, eventually you just stop making the arrests, and then the stats show decreased arrests, and the politicians say crime's gone down.
Right. Correct.
I mean, that's happened in D.C., Chicago, New York, San Francisco. That's very, very common. But if you're making your decisions based on bad data, then you're making bad decisions.
And meanwhile, you and I on the streets of South Paris, right? We're starting to see homeless. We're starting to see increased crime. We just had somebody who stole a car from a Walgreens parking lot in Little Podunk, South Paris, Maine. Right? Again, crime is on the rise.
I mean, there was a shootout in Rumford.
Yeah.
There were Trinitarios, Dominican transnational drug trafficking organization shooting assault-style rifles at Rumford police officers, almost unprovoked. They'd just been stopped in a traffic stop and opened fire on Rumford cops in Rumford, Maine.
Yeah.
And to my knowledge, the governor hasn't said anything about it. I don't think I've ever heard her address the topic of organized crime once, despite its prevalence in the state of Maine. It's shocking. Do you think are we dealing with incompetence and mismatched priorities here, or is there something more sinister, and like corruption? I mean, speaking of the Chinese drug trafficking thing, we know the governor's brother's involved. The governor's brother's done business with Chinese drug traffickers, has served as the lawyer for Chinese drug traffickers, including Chinese nationals who were living in China at the time, or at least provided addresses in China. And so the question is always, is the inaction and the tolerance of this organized crime activity the result of just incompetence, laziness, partisanship, different priorities, or is there something more sinister there?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were starting to ask a question, I was basically boiling it down. Is this incompetence or is it corruption? Right? Certainly and clearly it's incompetence, and I absolutely believe personally that there's corruption there. And part of what my administration will do is we need to go after the corruption. Part of that would be I want to create a Maine Doge. And on day one, we need to create a Maine Doge. And that Doge needs to not just look at regulations and red tape, but we also need to, and again, because all of that impacts the cost of living for you, for me, and the businesses. But we also need to look at corruption and being willing to, when we find something, pursue it for the fact that whatever party, I don't care, right? We need to be able to hold our government accountable to the people. There are rules, there are laws in place that include the government, and we need to hold them to it. We need to hold me to it if I'm sitting in that chair. That could be as simple as getting, basically buying things, right, without getting quotes.
No bid contracts.
Thank you. Yeah, that was the word I was looking for. Yeah, the no bid contracts, right? Like it came out that we weren't following our policies. We were doing a ton of no bid contracts for ridiculous things. And where's the accountability there? We need accountability for again, me when I'm governor, for the executive branch, for the legislature. Like it doesn't matter who you are. If you're not following the law, we need accountability and we need to address it.
I want to talk a little bit about the political side of things, I guess, as opposed to policy. You've been running now for, as you said, 2 years, declared very early on the first candidate to throw your hat in the ring. And you've had some, I would gather, interactions with the Republican Party apparatuses, the various county committees. Are there changes that you would like to see made to how the Republican Party operates in Maine? And what's been your experience so far with the various county committees and the state committee?
It's funny you say that.
That's a chance for you to make some enemies.
I know, right? Thanks. The reality is, and I'll start with your county committee question. The reality is there are some amazing people at the county levels with the county committees, and they have been carefully supportive, right? Again, it's a primary, and I will be, at this moment, 2 years ago it wasn't the case, but at this moment there's lots of us and probably even more coming in the primary. And so I don't want and don't expect to be treated any differently than anybody else. And most of the county committees, and I say most, I don't have anybody in mind that isn't like this, but are very careful to not treat Robert any different than any of the other candidates. And I appreciate that. And I hope it's going on the flip side with all the other candidates, and I trust that it is. I've built some great relationships. So again, I entered this not knowing any of them, or very few of them, and so I built some great relationships over the last 2 years just because I have been going to their events, and most of them just continue to say, "Hey, we have this event. We have this event." Which I'm sure they're offering to all the rest of the candidates as well. And they've been as supportive as they can be to, I believe, all candidates. On the state level, I think that we need to continue to grow in touch with everyday Mainers. And again, it's hard to know. Like we can now have had continuous change the last couple of times as far as chairmans, and so Jim hasn't been there that long, and so I'm optimistic and hope we go in the right direction. But ultimately, we need it. The party elites, if you will, seem to be a little out of touch, and I would make this comment, just again as broad over the last couple of years that I've noticed, and I've had a lot of conversations with everyday Mainers, everyday Republicans, who look and say we should be doing things differently, and so I would say.
Are there any specific things you think the Republican Party should be doing differently? I don't know whether whether this is pockets or whether this is a big thing, but like overall total state. But they're looking to start getting involved in local. At least some counties are starting to get involved in local elections and supporting people, and I think that's a win. I think that's a really, again, we need grassroots. And so it's funny watching the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. And again, as I'm just really, I'm an outsider. And so watching this is really interesting. When I declared my candidacy on a Facebook page, a local Facebook page, they're like, "Oh, what's your platform?" And I was like, "Here's my platform. Here are these. And I handpicked my platform. I didn't tell anybody what my platform was, and here it is. Meanwhile, there was a Democrat who was running for Senate, and she's like, "Hey, I'm running for Senate." And they're like, "What's your platform?" "Oh, Democrats believe this." Like, you didn't get the question. What's your platform, right? Yeah.
"Oh, Democrats believe." She never did come up with. And so it's two very different approaches to politics where stay in line, this is what you believe, this is what you're doing, and you'll be fine. Whereas we're herding cats on the Republican side, right? Like, "Oh, I believe, I'm in line with 6 out of your 7, items for a platform, but nope. That 7th one, I'm going over here," right? Like we're just, and so we need to, I love that. I love the freedom, the ability to think critically and reason, but we also need to come alongside and help One of the things that I've noticed dramatically in my campaign is, obviously I've been campaigning again for quite a while. I've come alongside and offered to help a bunch of House reps and Senate candidates around the state, and basically saying, listen, it benefits me to go door to door for you because I'm going to be giving my own stuff as well and having conversations about my campaign, but let me help you. And only 2 have taken me up on it. The vast majority of them are like, I'm all set, thanks. Like, I don't want your involvement. Now, maybe, to my knowledge, we're not that far off on most of the issues, so I don't know what the reasoning is behind that, but we need to come alongside. We need to help each other, and because clearly we need more seats. It'd be great if Robert got into the Blaine House or any other Republican candidate, but the reality is we need the House and the Senate to make so many of the changes that all of us want to make and Maine needs.
So also in the vein of politics, on Wednesday, there will be a Bush entering the race. Jonathan Bush has formed an exploratory committee. By virtue of his name, his family, the Bush family's role in American politics, he's going to get a big different reaction than you got when you entered the race, and then you would receive for any press conference you tried to hold. The Bangor Daily News, the Press Herald, they'll show up there. What's your how do you feel about that? The gap between the reaction to his entering the race versus your entering the race. Do you think it's reasonable based on fundraising potential, or is it kind of make you a little angry?
So I'm still being shunned by the media, right? Again, some polls I'm not included in. Some articles I'm not included in. And when asked about it, they're like, "Oh, well, we didn't know you were in." I'm like, "Well, it's a matter of just going to the state website, right? You can see my name. It's been there since 2023." But the reality is, when I entered this race, I knew I have no name recognition, and I'm just a regular Mainer who wants to make a difference and believes I have what it takes to make that difference. And so with that in mind, I'm not surprised whatsoever that a Bush with name and money would get a bigger, better reaction than Robert Wessels with no name, no money. And so not at all surprised, not at all discouraged by it. Do I wish upon a star that I would get press and people would listen to me and seek me out? Well, yeah, obviously everybody would want that, right? Do I wish that I got some big donors or just lots of small donors that came in and helped give the campaign a push? Yeah. By the way, go to voterobertwessels.com and you can donate there. But the reality is, right? Like I'm not going to dwell on that. I knew that's why I launched in July of 2023, because I knew I would be up against that. I think it's fun. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that, hey, I have the chance to beat a Bush in an election. Let's go. So I'm encouraged by it and determined. One thing you'll find out about me, if you haven't noticed already, I don't believe anybody's going to outwork me, and I am absolutely determined. I've run 5 marathons, and I'm ready to go, and I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm absolutely a determined personality that's ready to make this happen.
Well, I think that the fundraising is a crass part of politics, but it's also it's just a reality. If a Democratic candidate comes in and spends $10 million on TV ads or radio ads or digital ads or blankets the media, it's going to have an influence, especially negative ads. Negative ads will have a big influence discouraging voters. So I think primary voters, if they're thinking strategically about just wanting to get any Republican into the race, are going to be looking for a candidate who has the ability to raise money to run an effective campaign. So do you think that you have the ability to fundraise, to run an effective campaign? And I guess what would you say to voters or Republican Party elite who are concerned that maybe a Wessels campaign in a general election wouldn't have the financial resources to compete with, Hannah Pingree and the Sussman family, or Troy Jackson and Big Labor, or Shenna Bellows and the Maine People's Alliance.
So there's really two questions in there.
Oh, sorry, I forgot Angus King, the fifth or sixth.
There's really a couple questions in there, and one is, do I have the ability to run an effective campaign really with the money that I have, or with the money that I'm able to raise, right? And the answer is wholeheartedly, absolutely yes. Again, I am one of the smallest fundraisers so far on the Republican primary. But at the same time, I might be slightly biased, but my name's coming out there quite a bit, right? And so there's a lot of conversations around, I'm in there. I am in one of the options that, many people are looking at. And so to me, I'm looking and saying, I am being effective on a shoestring budget. By the way, as governor, I'm going to need to be effective on a shoestring budget. By the way, I've had the last 24 years of being effective on a shoestring budget, with my household and business and all of that. And so that's a skill that's absolutely critical. I have it, and I'm doing it. And then, yes, we absolutely need to figure out the fundraising piece and get there. I think the more effective I am with my campaign, the more effective our fundraising will continue to get. It's already picked up, but it will continue to get there. And as people, quite honestly, there's a mindset out there of he doesn't have a chance, right? And so would you donate to something that doesn't have a chance? But as I continue to prove that not only do I have a chance, but it's a good chance, the fundraising will continue to get there. And my argument, as far as the general goes, if I win the primary against all of the big names, with being under fundraised, I don't anticipate that when we get to the end of the primary, we're going to see Robert at the top of the donor list, right? Like, I won't have the biggest war chest that I have spent. And so that means I will have beat people with more money in the primary when I make it to the general, and we'll continue to do the same thing in the general. It's about the message. It's about the person. It's about the character. We have to get that out. We have to fundraise to be able to get that message out. But we also have to be smart and figure out how to do that on a shoestring budget if necessary.
We're looking at holding another gubernatorial debate for the Republican primary candidates in around January. I think the Maine Civic Action might be organizing it, which is a partner organization of the Maine Policy Institute, which is the parent organization of the Maine Wire and my employer. And I would be moderating the debate, and we're talking about different things that go into organizing a debate, and one of them is who's on stage. At the Old Orchard Beach debate, there was a declared candidate who has, filed with the ethics board, whose name's on the website, who wasn't allowed in the debate. And I thought Ray made the right decision, but it was also a decision that was just made by Ray, by an individual personality, as opposed to a set of rules known in advance and thresholds established, not retrospectively to pick which candidates are there and which aren't. So what would you say are fair criteria? Say we get to January, all the candidates who are being speculated and are on the sidelines, the maybes, they've all jumped in or clearly not going to run. We know what the field's going to look like. What would a threshold for the entry into a debate stage in January look like for that scenario?
Well, I'm glad I won't have to make that decision, and we'll see how many people are there, right? And for one, I don't think we should have potential candidates on the platform. If you're not committed enough to actually commit and say, I'm a candidate, you shouldn't be on there.
Well, that's a given. Right. That's a given.
Well,
I'm talking
we've
more.
We've had potential candidates in the past, and so
I'm aware.
So
I'm talking more about we only declared candidates, but then
Yeah.
it's petition signatures, fundraising. Oftentimes in presidential elections, the criteria is based on the average of your poll and candidate paid for polling, actual.
As long as we're all included in the polls, right?
Yeah.
Then maybe that's not a bad way to go. If you say X% or something like that. But the problem is you have those of us who haven't been included in a bunch of those polls, and so where arguably I'd perform better if I was included in those. So.
Well, yeah, I think
it's
hard. It's hard to perform at all if you're not included in the poll. Yeah. So I guess do you think that it's fair to peg eligibility for a debate to a fundraising level?
I don't.
No,
I don't. I think that clearly fundraising absolutely helps. It's critical. But at the same time, I think we've proven that we can accomplish a ton with a shoestring budget. And if somebody is looking and saying, well, on one hand, Mainers hate to have money in politics, right? Like we continue to vote to not have big money in politics, or at least talk about not wanting big money in politics. And then all of a sudden we're saying, oh, well, you don't have big money in politics. You don't get to debate. I don't think that's the way to go.
Did you ever consider, and sorry not to harp on the fundraising thing, but did you ever consider the clean elections route?
I did.
Our law, you jumped.
I don't like to call it clean elections.
No,
I know.
I don't.
Funded,
I don't either. I'm sorry. I keep using the language of the left.
I know.
It's a mistake.
And so I did consider it when I was looking to launch my campaign, and considered both options. And the reality is, as soon as I found out what clean elections were, and the fact that it's just your tax dollars and mine going towards my campaign, that would be the easier route, 100%, especially for somebody like me. And I just looked and said, absolutely not. I can't. If you hate me as a candidate, right, if you are against 100% of everything I stand for, your tax dollars should not go to fund my campaign. And they are, if I do clean elections. I also can't harp on the budget and how we misspend our money as a state in Augusta, and then take hundreds of thousands of dollars from that budget for my own personal campaign.
I think it would be millions for a gubernatorial campaign, actually. If you qualify enough, and if the privately funded candidates raise enough money, I'm pretty sure the threshold is over
out of the
$1 million.
principle of it, I did consider it, and very quickly came to the decision that even though it would be easier and probably better for my campaign, I can't do it.
And the last thing I want to ask you about, question 2, gun control, coming up November 4th. There's this debate between the yellow flag law versus the red flag law, also known as the extreme risk protection order. It's been, since the mass shooting in Lewiston, there's been robust debate over Maine's gun control laws. There's been a change as to how they are being implemented. The Maine State Police made the extraordinary decision to testify against the law that's being proposed with question 2. Your position on the question 2 and the status of gun control laws in the state.
Yeah, so I was there when he testified against question 2, and was
Lieutenant Colonel Michael Johnston.
Yes, he did. He did an amazing job, and I loved the fact how he approached it, and everything that he said. And so I was there to testify also against question 2, and so I will absolutely be voting no on 2. I'll be voting yes on 1 as well. And so, but to me, the red flag law it's terrible, because it takes away your right to own a gun before you're guilty before proven innocent, right? And they just take it away without due process. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Are you a gun owner?
I am.
Yep. What do you carry, or hunting rifles?
I have a 9mm.
Yeah.
Yep.
For home defense, range, competitive shooting, just.
All of the above.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right.
Not competitive.
I'm just
not
I'm just curious. I'm not
but yeah,
asking
just
as
for fun.
a political question, but
Again, we have a farm, and we have land around that we can go and do target shooting and stuff like that, and teach the kids and carefully and just
At what age do you think is acceptable to start teaching kids proper safety with firearms?
I don't know. I didn't personally teach them, real terribly young, but I wouldn't be opposed to that. Again, if you as a dad or a mom, know what you're doing, and I think you have really, you need to be teaching. Like, we did teach them gun safety, like, don't touch this, right? Like, and we locked it up, and but we talked about it, and to me, I think that in many cases, the younger the better, within reason. If they're going to be interacting with guns, guns aren't dangerous by themselves, right? And so how do you as a human interact with it? That's critical. And so that needs to be taught.
Robert Wessels, if people want to find out more about your campaign, what's the website they can go to find you? Facebook, X, Threads, Blue Sky. Where can people find you on social media?
I'm not on Blue Sky
You're
yet.
not.
No.
You're not on Blue Sky.
So we are on X, we are on Facebook, and we're on Instagram, and absolutely love interacting with people. So definitely find us on social media.
And just search Robert Wessels, or do you have a handle? Wessels for Maine or something like that?
Yeah, and so you can, the best and easiest way would be go to my website, voterobertwessels.com. You can see issues. You can see there's easy links to social media platforms, and you can find me on there. And again, you can donate so I can make the next qualification for a debate.
Well, thank you very much, Robert. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.